Human was the worst in his class, until he revealed his true power. Jalen sat at the back of the massive training hall, quietly staring at the holographic display in front of him. Around him, students from dozens of different worlds moved with skill and precision, their powers flowing like rivers of light. A reptilian named Scar lifted boulders with ease, floating them across the room. An avian called Lyra conjured a storm of wind, her wings slicing through the air as if she were dancing. Even the smallest students could manipulate energy with a flick of their fingers. And then there was Jalen, human, trembling as he tried to lift a simple practice orb. It didn't move, not an inch. A soft chuckle came from behind him. "Still struggling, human?" A blue-skinned alien with 4 eyes grinned as he manipulated his orb to spin like a mini-sun. Jalen swallowed and said nothing. He hated confrontation, but he had learned long ago that speaking usually made things worse. "Come on, Jalen," the instructor barked. A tall, wiry alien with 6 arms walked down the rows of students, stopping to inspect each attempt. "Focus." The Federation's academy does not tolerate weakness. Jalen's cheeks burned. "I am focusing," he whispered to himself. The orb barely lifted off the ground, hovering just a fraction of an inch before falling back with a dull thump. The instructor shook his head and moved on, sighing. Jalen slumped forward, trying to hide the sting of embarrassment. Every day was like this. No matter how hard he tried, no matter how many hours he spent practicing, he was always behind. He was the worst in the class. When the training session ended, the hall emptied quickly. Students chattered among themselves, showing off their abilities and comparing results. Jalen quietly gathered his things and made his way to the library. The library was his favorite place. It was quiet, and no one cared how human he was. He pulled out a data pad and opened a holographic textbook about alien energy manipulation. Most humans didn't have natural energy control like other species, but Jalen had something else: curiosity. He watched videos of older students, analyzing their movements and strategies, noting tiny details no one else seemed to notice. "Why bother?" a voice said, startling him. It was his classmate Rill, a tall feline alien with sharp ears and amber eyes. "You'll never match them." "Humans are weak. You're a joke here." Jalen clenched his jaw but didn't reply. Words had never helped before. Instead, he opened another simulation on the data pad, focusing on small patterns he had noticed in the training exercises. While other students relied on raw power, Jalen tried to think differently. He studied timing, angles, and energy fluctuations. Slowly, methodically, he ran through simulations in his mind. Hours passed. The lights in the library dimmed as the hall emptied. When Jalen finally looked up, the room was silent. He stretched, his muscles sore but his mind buzzing with ideas. The next morning, the students gathered for the Federation's weekly assessments. Each student had to demonstrate their ability in front of instructors and peers. Jalen's turn came last, as usual. He watched as Scar lifted an entire boulder with a wave of his hand, his classmates cheering. Lyra conjured a mini tornado, her wings flaring as the wind whipped around her. Jalen's turn approached, and his stomach twisted. "Human," the instructor called, "show us your ability." Jalen stepped forward, holding his practice orb. Everyone snickered. Even the instructors had low expectations. He took a deep breath, recalling the patterns he had studied the night before. Slowly, he focused. He shifted his weight slightly, moved his hands in a sequence he had memorized, and nothing happened. The orb stayed on the ground. A sharp laugh echoed from the back. "Pathetic," Rill shouted. "Even a hatchling could do better." Jalen's face flushed. He wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and be anywhere else. But he didn't. Instead, he did something he had never tried before. He closed his eyes and focused not on lifting the orb with strength, but on understanding it. He imagined the forces around it, the tiniest currents of energy that flowed through the room. Slowly, incredibly slowly, the orb began to wobble. It lifted a few inches, then swayed like a leaf in the wind. Gasps echoed through the hall. Jalen opened his eyes. He could feel it, an unfamiliar sensation of control, not brute force but balance. The orb rose higher, spinning gently as Jalen guided it with precision. The room was silent. No one moved, afraid to breathe. Jalen's classmates stared wide-eyed. The instructors looked at each other, shocked. In all their years, they had never seen a human do this. And then Jalen did something daring. He sent the orb spinning through the air, dodging other floating obstacles and returning it to his hands with perfect timing. The movement was elegant, almost artistic. When he finally set it down, the hall erupted into astonished whispers. "Impossible," one of the instructors muttered. Rill's face was pale, eyes wide. "How?" he stammered. Jalen simply shook his head, unsure how to explain it himself. He had always been observant, adaptable, patient. He had studied, learned, and experimented in ways others didn't bother with. That was his strength. Not raw power, not flashy skills, but understanding. After the assessment, the instructor called him aside. "Human," he said, his 6 arms folding behind his back. "You surprised us today. I want you to continue practicing under supervision. Your method is unconventional but effective." Jalen nodded, trying not to smile too broadly. He had expected ridicule, humiliation, maybe even dismissal. Instead, he had earned a chance, a small but important acknowledgement that he might belong here after all. Over the next few weeks, Jalen continued to train quietly. He studied alien techniques, adapting them with human ingenuity. When his classmates relied on force or flashy displays, he focused on observation and strategy. He created simulations, tested outcomes, and learned from every failure. Slowly, word spread through the academy. Students began to notice the human who seemed weak at first but was always watching, always learning, always improving. One evening, as Jalen worked alone in the practice hall, Scar approached him. The massive reptilian's eyes were narrow. "You've improved," he said grudgingly. "I didn't think a human could adapt like that," Jalen shrugged. "I'm just trying to understand." Scar studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Keep it up, human. One day you might surprise even yourself." Jalen smiled faintly. No one had ever said something like that to him before. Humans were often dismissed across the galaxy. Weak, fragile, limited. But he had found a way to turn those assumptions upside down, not by trying to be like everyone else, but by being himself. As the stars outside the academy shimmered, Jalen felt a spark of hope. He wasn't strong in the traditional sense. He wasn't the fastest, the most powerful, or the most naturally gifted. But he had something else: curiosity, creativity, patience, and determination. In a universe that valued raw strength and innate talent, those were weapons no one could predict. And somewhere deep down, Jalen knew this was only the beginning. A shadow passed across the practice hall window, and Jalen looked up. A shuttle had landed near the academy gates, a message from the Federation. The galaxy was changing. Threats were growing. Students who had once laughed at him would soon learn that being underestimated could be dangerous. Jalen returned to his orb, now hovering steadily in the center of the room. He let it spin, his mind racing with possibilities. One day he would show everyone, not just his classmates, not just his instructors, but the entire galaxy, that a human's power was not to be ignored. For now, though he trained quietly, he observed, he learned, and he prepared. The worst student in the academy had not disappeared. He had only been waiting for the right moment to reveal what humans were truly capable of. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the United Galactic Federation Academy, painting streaks of gold across the training grounds. Students were already practicing their skills, moving with confidence and power. Jalen stood quietly at the edge of the field, watching them carefully. His body ached from yesterday's session, but his mind was alive with ideas. He had discovered something new within himself, a tiny spark of power that he didn't fully understand yet, but it was enough to make him feel different, capable. His classmates were busy showing off. Lyra the avian hovered above the field, tossing small gusts of wind like a playful dance. Scar was lifting heavier and heavier stones, letting them float in perfect formations. Rill was practicing rapid energy blasts, the air around his hands crackling with light. Everyone moved with a confidence that made Jalen feel small, but he refused to be discouraged. He had learned the hard way that comparison was dangerous. Humans could not rely on brute force or innate talent, but they had something more unpredictable: ingenuity. A bell rang across the campus, signaling the start of the weekly Federation Challenge. It was a competition to test each student's progress, a mixture of combat exercises, mental puzzles, and adaptability tests. Jalen had always struggled here. In previous challenges, he had been slow, clumsy, and uncoordinated, but today something felt different. The instructor's voice echoed through the grounds. "Students, today's challenge will test not only your strength but your creativity. You will face obstacles designed to push every ability to its limit. Only those who think beyond themselves will succeed." Jalen swallowed hard and adjusted the straps of his training pack. He was last to be called, as always, and he felt the familiar heat of embarrassment rising in his chest. But he focused on breathing, on quiet observation. That had helped him before, and it would help him now. The challenge began. Students rushed through the first obstacle, a labyrinth of shifting energy barriers. Some moved with ease, phasing through walls or flying over them. Jalen hesitated, scanning the maze carefully. The walls shifted in patterns, and he noticed something the others did not. Each barrier had a delay, a rhythm. Timing it correctly, he moved between the walls, barely touching them, and reached the center faster than anyone expected. A murmur went through the crowd. Even Lyra blinked in surprise. Jalen's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from excitement. He had solved the first obstacle in his own way. The second obstacle was a series of combat simulations. Hollow targets appeared around the field, each firing energy blasts. Students had to dodge and disable them in sequence. Most relied on speed or raw power. Jalen, however, watched carefully. He noticed that each target had a tiny pause before firing again. Timing his movements with precision, he disabled the targets one by one, moving with a rhythm that seemed natural, almost effortless. When the instructor tallied the results, Jalen's score was higher than anyone expected. Higher than Scar, higher than Lyra, higher than even Rill. Whispers spread across the field. The human who had always been last was suddenly near the top. Rill approached, eyes narrowed. "This doesn't make sense. How are you doing this?" Jalen shrugged lightly. "I'm just watching and learning." Rill's lips curled into a snarl. "Humans think too much. You're lucky this is just a simulation." Jalen smiled faintly, not wanting to argue. He knew it wasn't luck. It was observation, analysis, and adaptation. The traits humans had in abundance, even if the galaxy rarely gave them credit. The final obstacle was the most challenging, a test against an unpredictable opponent. A holographic combatant appeared, shifting forms and powers with every attack. Students had to adapt instantly or fail. Many rushed forward, striking with force, only to be knocked down repeatedly. Jalen hesitated, analyzing the hologram's patterns. He noticed something almost no one else did. The opponent's attacks followed a sequence, repeating slightly each time. Using this knowledge, he moved carefully, dodging and countering, not with power but with precision. Each step, each block, each strike was calculated. Slowly, he began to turn the fight in his favor. The hologram faltered under his unpredictable movements, unsure how to respond. The crowd went silent. Jalen had always been underestimated, but now the human was showing a level of strategy no one had anticipated. When the simulation ended, Jalen was declared one of the top performers. The instructors nodded at him with approval, their expressions a mix of surprise and respect. "Interesting," one instructor murmured. "This human shows remarkable adaptability. We will need to monitor him closely." Jalen felt a warmth in his chest. Recognition was rare for humans, especially in a place filled with naturally powerful species. But he didn't let it distract him. He knew he had only scratched the surface of what he could do. After the challenge, Jalen returned to the training hall. He sat quietly, reviewing what had happened in his mind. Each obstacle had been a puzzle, each opponent a teacher. He realized that raw power could only take someone so far. What mattered more was understanding the rules, observing patterns, and finding new ways to turn weakness into strength. Hours later, while the sun dipped below the horizon, the academy gates opened. A shuttle landed, its engines humming quietly. A Federation officer stepped out, scanning the campus. Students gathered around, murmuring in excitement. The officer approached the instructors, delivering a message that immediately captured everyone's attention. "The outer sectors report unusual activity. We need a team to investigate. This is a matter of interstellar security. The students selected will be trained for immediate deployment." The instructors exchanged serious glances. Jalen's heart skipped a beat. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Humans were often overlooked, dismissed as weak, but this was a chance to prove something more. When the selection process began, students were called one by one. Scar, Lyra, Rill, and others showed off their powers, each demonstrating skill and speed. When Jalen's name was finally called, he stepped forward calmly, observing the room and the tests that awaited him. The instructors watched closely, curious to see how the human would perform under pressure. The first test was a simulation of a hostile planet. Students had to navigate dangerous terrain, evade traps, and rescue stranded civilians. Many relied on their powers alone, rushing forward recklessly. Jalen took a different approach. He scanned the environment carefully, noting weak points, hazards, and patterns in the enemy's defenses. Step by step, he advanced, using small inventions and clever maneuvers to overcome obstacles. By the time he reached the civilians, he had outmaneuvered the simulation entirely. The instructors were astonished. "He's not the fastest," one said, "not the strongest, but he always finds a way." The second test involved an alien puzzle device that required both intelligence and energy manipulation. Students who failed were quickly disqualified. Many struggled, their natural powers failing to solve the intricate mechanisms. Jalen observed, studied, and experimented. Slowly, methodically, he manipulated the device, using logic, timing, and his understanding of the alien patterns. When the device finally activated, the room erupted into stunned silence. The human had solved it with elegance. Even Rill couldn't hide his frustration. "How he's just human," he muttered, shaking his head. Jalen ignored the whispers. He had learned long ago that envy and doubt were distractions. He focused only on the task in front of him. The final selection test was a combat scenario against a team of advanced drones. Students were paired off, fighting to disable the drones while protecting a valuable resource. Most relied on their powers, striking hard and fast. Jalen, however, observed the drones carefully, noting their programming patterns and predictable movements. Instead of brute force, he set traps, redirected energy blasts, and used the environment to his advantage. By the end of the test, he had disabled all the drones without a single serious injury. The instructors were amazed. "The human has strategy," one said quietly. "He adapts. He predicts. He's not just surviving, he's controlling the outcome." When the results were announced, Jalen had passed every test with high marks. Not the highest in raw power, but the most effective in results. He had been selected for the Special Deployment Team, the first human ever to achieve such recognition at the Academy. As the sun set and the stars began to appear in the sky, Jalen walked alone to the Academy's highest observation deck. He gazed at the countless stars, thinking of the vast galaxy beyond. Humans had always been underestimated. Fragile, weak, slow, words used by countless species to dismiss them. Yet here he was, chosen for a mission that others had assumed would be impossible. For the first time, he felt a surge of pride, not arrogance but determination. He had proven that being human didn't mean being weak. It meant being clever, adaptable, and relentless. The galaxy underestimated humans at its own risk. Somewhere far beyond the Academy walls, dangers were growing. Threats that could not be stopped by power alone. But Jalen was ready. He had learned to see patterns where others saw chaos, to turn limitations into advantages, and to never give up. And as he stood there watching the stars, he knew that the journey ahead would be more dangerous than anything he had faced before. But he was no longer the weakest in his class. He was a human. And humans had a way of surviving, adapting, and overcoming, no matter the odds. The Federation training grounds were buzzing with activity. Students from all corners of the galaxy moved in coordinated chaos, practicing their powers, running obstacle courses, and preparing for the special mission that had been announced. Jalen walked among them, quietly observing, his mind always calculating, always analyzing. He was no longer the last in his class. The instructors had recognized his abilities, and even his classmates began to watch him with wary respect. Yet not all attention was positive. Rill, the feline alien who had mocked him for weeks, lingered nearby, his amber eyes narrowed. He had never been comfortable with the idea of a human surpassing expectations. To Rill, humans were fragile, weak, and unremarkable. Seeing Jalen excel, adapt, and think in ways no other student did was a direct challenge to everything he believed. Jalen ignored Rill. He didn't need to fight every battle with words. Observation had always been more powerful than argument. Today, the mission simulation would test adaptability, teamwork, and leadership, qualities Jalen had honed quietly for months. The instructors called all selected students to the central arena. The team for the mission against the outer sector threat would be determined today. Students lined up, their expressions a mix of excitement and nerves. A large holographic screen lit up in the center, displaying an alien planet with jagged terrain, unstable energy fields, and signs of hostile activity. This simulation, the lead instructor began, represents the conditions you will face on the outer sectors. You will be paired into teams and must complete a series of objectives: reconnaissance, neutralization of threats, and extraction of critical data. Only those who can think beyond raw power and act strategically will succeed. Jalen's pulse quickened. This was not a simple obstacle course. This was a test of everything he had been preparing for. He scanned the holographic map, noting hazards, patrol patterns, and energy fluctuations. Other students were already arguing about strategy, relying on their abilities and instinct rather than careful observation. The teams were assigned. Jalen found himself paired with Lyra, Scar, and another student he barely knew, a small amphibious alien named Tico, whose strength was minor but whose speed was remarkable. Rill was assigned to a different team, and Jalen felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. He did not intend to face Rill directly, but he knew their paths would cross. The simulation began. A shuttle dropped them onto the planet's surface, its engines kicking up dust and debris. Jagged cliffs rose around them, and the sky glowed with a faint, unnatural energy. Immediately, the other team members began rushing forward, using powers to clear obstacles or attack imaginary enemies. Jalen held back, scanning the terrain and studying patterns. "Move faster," Lyra called, flapping her wings to create gusts of wind. "We don't have time to overthink," Jalen shook his head. "If we rush, we'll trigger traps. Let me guide the way." His voice was calm, confident, and surprisingly firm. Lyra blinked, unused to being told what to do. Scar growled softly, skeptical but silent. Tico darted around, impatient but trusting Jalen's quiet authority. As they advanced, the first test appeared, a series of energy mines scattered across a narrow canyon. One misstep could activate them, sending a lethal shockwave across the path. The others were about to charge through when Jalen stopped them. He studied the pulses, timing the delays, and realized there was a rhythm to the explosions. "Step here, then there," he instructed, pointing to precise spots. "Now." They followed his guidance, moving with perfect synchronization. When they reached the other side, not a single mine had detonated. Lyra's eyes widened. "How did you?" Jalen shrugged. "Observation, timing, patience." The next objective was a patrol of automated sentry drones. The other teams attacked head-on, firing energy blasts that were absorbed or deflected by the drones' shields. Jalen studied the drones' movements and realized they had a small blind spot in their detection cycles. Using only minimal energy and clever maneuvering, he guided the team to slip past undetected, neutralizing the drones silently. Scar grunted in approval. "Not bad for a human," he admitted. The simulation grew more challenging. The terrain shifted, energy fields surged unpredictably, and holographic enemies appeared in coordinated attacks. Many students struggled, relying on raw power to compensate and failing repeatedly. Jalen, however, adapted. He noticed subtle cues, slight changes in energy patterns, minor vibrations in the ground, even the way shadows fell across the landscape. Each observation gave him an edge, allowing him to anticipate threats before they became real. By the time they reached the data terminal, the objective's critical point, other teams were in disarray. Exhausted, battered, or completely stuck, they had relied too heavily on force and speed. Jalen's team, by contrast, arrived with minimal effort, moving as a unit, efficient and precise. He interfaced with the terminal, quickly analyzing the alien systems and extracting the required information. When the simulation ended, the instructor's holographic projection showed the results. Jalen's team had completed the objectives flawlessly, far surpassing all others. Murmurs ran through the arena. Even Lyra and Scar seemed impressed, their previous doubts replaced by cautious respect. The lead instructor approached Jalen. "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "Your approach is unconventional, but it is highly effective. You do not rely on power alone. You observe, adapt, and use your environment. This is the essence of true strategy." Jalen nodded, not needing to boast. He had learned long ago that pride was dangerous. Results mattered more than recognition, but not everyone was pleased. Rill, who had watched the simulation from the observation deck, clenched his fists. "This is impossible," he muttered to himself. "A human shouldn't be able to do this. No species can match this level of adaptation without natural power." Jalen ignored the whispers, focusing instead on what lay ahead. This was only a simulation. Real missions would be far more dangerous, unpredictable, and lethal. But he was ready. He had learned to think differently, to use what others overlooked, and to survive where others failed. The following days were a blur of preparation. Students trained intensively, reviewing tactics, energy manipulation, and interspecies coordination. Jalen spent most of his time alone, observing, experimenting, and refining his approach. He learned the smallest details about each teammate's strengths and weaknesses, anticipating how they would react in stressful situations. His human ability to adapt, improvise, and analyze became sharper every day. One evening, while reviewing simulation footage, Jalen noticed something unsettling. A shadow moved in the background, an anomaly that no one else had seen. It was subtle, barely perceptible, but it repeated across multiple simulations. Something or someone was watching, studying them. The thought made his stomach tight. "Who could it be?" Tico asked, noticing his concern. "I don't know," Jalen admitted. "But whoever it is, they're not just observing. They're analyzing patterns, looking for weaknesses." The next day, during a tactical exercise, the presence became more obvious. A rival student, a tall, dark-skinned alien named Kale, approached Jalen during the exercise. Kale's eyes glinted with curiosity and challenge. "You're the human," Kale said, his voice calm but firm. "I've been watching you. You're unusual. No one adapts like you. It's irritating." Jalen regarded him quietly. "I adapt because I have to. It's survival, not skill." Kale smirked. "We'll see how long that lasts." He walked away, leaving Jalen with a chill. Kale was not hostile yet, but his interest was clear. Someone like him would not forget a human who could outthink nearly everyone in the academy. Over the next week, tension grew. Kale continued to observe Jalen, silently studying him. Rumors spread among the students. The human who had once been the weakest was now the most adaptable, clever, and dangerous, not in brute force, but in mind and strategy. Some students admired him, others resented him, and a few, like Rill, grew openly hostile. Jalen didn't engage in arguments. He focused on training, analyzing every pattern, testing every strategy. He experimented with combinations of energy manipulation and technology, finding ways to enhance his skills without anyone noticing. He was patient. He knew that the moment to truly reveal his full potential would come soon. One night, the instructors called the selected team together for a briefing. Hollow projections of the outer sectors, troubled regions filled the room. Reports of strange anomalies, hostile alien movements, and unstable energy fields demanded urgent attention. "This mission will not be easy," the lead instructor said. "You will face dangers unlike anything you have seen in simulations. Success will require more than power. You will need ingenuity, teamwork, and courage. Humans are often underestimated in such scenarios. But sometimes the smallest spark can change the outcome." Jalen listened carefully, feeling a surge of determination. He was no longer the weakest. He was ready to step into the galaxy and prove that humans were not to be underestimated. And as he looked around at his team, he realized that their survival and the success of the mission might very well depend on him. The galaxy was about to test him. And Jalen, the human who had once been last in his class, was ready to show just how far a mind like his could go. The shuttle landed with a heavy thrum, shaking the floor beneath Jalen's feet. Outside, the planet stretched endlessly, a jagged, rocky landscape under a greenish sky. The mission team stepped out cautiously. Wind whipped around them, carrying the scent of ozone and something metallic, like a warning. Jalen's heart beat steadily, not from fear, but from focus. He had trained for this moment. Every observation, every calculation, every experiment, it had all led to this. The outer sector was not a place for the weak. Alien scouts had reported hostile forces, creatures with advanced energy manipulation, and unstable terrain that could collapse at any moment. Every student on the team had shown skill, but this was the first real test beyond the Academy's controlled simulations. Lyra flapped her wings, scanning the horizon. "I don't like this," she said, her sharp eyes narrowing. "It feels wrong, too quiet," Scar growled. "Quiet means danger." Jalen nodded, his gaze sweeping the area. He noticed subtle vibrations in the rocks, faint energy fluctuations in the air, and the way shadows shifted unnaturally across the terrain. It was like the planet itself was alive, watching them. Tico, the small amphibious alien, shivered. "I've never been this far from the Academy. It's scary." Jalen put a reassuring hand on Tico's shoulder. Focus on what you can see, what you can control. Don't panic. We'll get through this if we stay smart. The team moved forward cautiously. The first obstacle appeared quickly, a series of jagged cliffs separated by narrow chasms. Energy fields surged along the edges, and one misstep could trigger a collapse. Students from other teams had already failed in similar situations. "Wait," Jalen whispered, stepping forward. He studied the currents of energy and the way the rocks were shifting. "We can use the resonance of the energy fields to stabilize the path. Follow me exactly." He guided Lyra, Scar, and Tico across, moving slowly and deliberately. Each step was calculated, precise, and timed perfectly. When they reached solid ground, the others were watching from a distance, unable to believe how a human could lead with such precision. The next challenge was more dangerous. A squad of alien drones, unlike anything in the Academy's simulations, appeared, patrolling the area. Their energy blasts were unpredictable, and their sensors were highly advanced. Most students would have charged forward or relied on brute power. Jalen, however, froze for a moment and observed. He noticed the drones' attack patterns. Each had a slight pause after firing, a tiny blind spot just long enough for an agile opponent to slip through. "Split up," Jalen instructed calmly. "Move only when I signal." Lyra, create a gust to distract the front drones. Scar, stay ready to block. Tico, flank from the side. They followed his directions, and Jalen moved with a mixture of agility and strategy, guiding each team member like pieces on a chessboard. One by one, the drones were disabled, some with minimal energy expenditure, others redirected into environmental hazards. When the last drone fell, the team paused, catching their breath. You did that?" Lyra gasped. "I've never seen anyone move like that before." Jalen shook his head. "I didn't move fast, I just watched. Timing matters more than power sometimes." The mission's true danger revealed itself next. A massive energy storm erupted in the valley below. Lightning-like tendrils danced across the rocky surface, creating deadly zones of volatile energy. The other teams scattered in panic, but Jalen remained calm. He noticed patterns in the storm, the pulses, the intervals, the safest points to step. "Follow me," he called, signaling with his hands. "Step here, now, move fast across this patch, wait now." It was risky. One mistake would be fatal, but Jalen's careful observation allowed the team to move through the storm almost flawlessly. Lyra's wings were singed slightly. Tico slipped once, but Scar blocked him in time. Every step required concentration, timing, and trust in Jalen's guidance. By the time they reached the other side, their hearts were racing, their breaths shallow, but they had survived. The other teams were scattered, some injured, others completely stuck in the storm. Jalen's approach had not only saved them, but allowed them to advance farther than anyone else. As they moved toward the mission's objective, a communication hub that had been seized by hostile forces, they encountered the enemy. A squad of alien mercenaries, heavily armored and equipped with advanced energy weapons, blocked their path. Unlike drones, these enemies could think, adapt, and respond. Their leader, a tall alien with crimson armor, stepped forward. "So the human leads," he said, his voice calm but filled with mockery. "I've heard of you, weak, fragile, a joke among the Academy. And yet here you are, guiding your team like a child." Jalen's jaw tightened. "I'm not here to talk," he replied, his voice steady. "Move." The battle began. The mercenaries attacked with coordinated strikes, energy blasts, and traps. Lyra flapped her wings furiously, deflecting attacks. Scar used his strength to block and shield. Tico darted between opponents, fast but vulnerable. And Jalen, he observed. Every movement, every pause, every angle. Then he acted. He used the environment to his advantage. Loose rocks became projectiles, energy blasts were reflected off metallic surfaces, and the enemy's patterns were used against them. He guided his teammates, issuing precise instructions in real time. "Left, now, Scar, block the next strike. Tico, flank behind. Lyra, wind gust." The mercenaries were caught off guard. They had expected a fight of power, of brute force. They did not expect strategy, timing, or clever use of surroundings. Slowly, Jalen's team gained the upper hand, forcing the enemies to retreat one by one. Finally, the leader faced Jalen directly. Crimson armor clashed with human ingenuity. He swung with raw power, energy crackling from his gauntlets. Jalen dodged, ducked, and used misdirection to create openings. He led the enemy into a narrow canyon, where falling rocks and energy pulses worked in his favor. With one calculated move, he trapped the mercenary under a falling boulder, neutralizing the threat. The battle was over. The communication hub was secure. The other teams arrived moments later, stunned to see Jalen's human team victorious. Whispers ran through the ranks. The human, once the weakest, had turned strategy into a weapon far stronger than raw power. Kale, who had been observing from a distance, stepped forward. His dark eyes gleamed with interest and challenge. "You're extraordinary," he said quietly, almost admiringly. "I underestimated you, human, but next time I won't." Jalen didn't respond. He knew the real danger was not rivals, it was the galaxy itself, unpredictable and lethal. His team had survived, but they had only scratched the surface of the threats beyond the academy. That night, the team gathered at their temporary base. Lyra cleaned her wings, Scar flexed his massive arms, and Tico patched minor injuries. Jalen stood apart, analyzing every detail of the mission, replaying events in his mind. He realized something important. Humans were underestimated not because they were weak, but because no one expected them to think differently. Strength was not just energy or skill, it was creativity, observation, and the ability to adapt to any situation. And in a universe filled with predictable powers, that unpredictability was a weapon. Lyra approached him quietly. "You saved us today. I've never seen anyone do what you did. You're amazing." Jalen smiled faintly. "We survived because we worked together. Observation alone isn't enough. Everyone had to trust each other." Tico nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, but you're like a genius human." "You saw things we didn't even notice." Jalen shook his head. "I just pay attention, that's all humans do best." Scar growled softly, a rare sound of approval. "You're no longer the weakest, not by far." As Jalen looked out the window at the rocky landscape, he realized the mission had changed him. He was no longer just a student. He was a strategist, a leader, and a human who had proven that creativity, patience, and adaptability could outmatch raw power. But he also knew that the galaxy was vast, full of enemies far stronger and more cunning than these mercenaries. This was only the beginning. Somewhere, forces beyond the outer sectors were moving, watching, and planning. And Jalen, the human who had once been last in his class, would be ready. He tightened his fist, determination burning in his eyes. The universe might underestimate humans, but they would soon learn that a mind like his could turn the tide of any battle. The horizon burned with crimson light as the alarm blared across the Federation outpost. A fleet of unknown ships appeared suddenly in the outer sector, moving with precision and speed that outmatched the Federation's early warning systems. Panic rippled through the academy, and the seasoned instructors rushed to mobilize students. This was no simulation, this was real. Jalen's pulse was steady. He had trained for this moment, though nothing in the academy could fully prepare anyone for a threat like this. His team, Lyra, Scar, and Tico, assembled quickly, trusting him to lead. Other squads were already scrambling into formation, but Jalen's mind worked faster than anyone else's. He observed patterns in the enemy fleet, the angles of approach, the energy readings, and the movement of their ships. The humans' unpredictability, he realized, would be their greatest strength. "This is not like anything we've faced," Scar growled, his reptilian eyes scanning the fleet. "They're fast, coordinated, and deadly," Jalen nodded. "Then we won't meet them the way they expect. Stay close, follow my lead, and watch carefully. Every movement counts." The Federation fleet prepared to engage, but Jalen saw the flaw in their approach. Most humans and aliens relied on raw firepower and pre-programmed strategies. The enemy predicted standard tactics, but no one accounted for improvisation. That was where he had the advantage. The battle began. Ships clashed with flashes of energy, explosions lighting up the void. Jalen directed his team from the bridge of their own vessel, issuing rapid instructions. "Tico, monitor the energy flux in their shields. Scar, position our ship near the debris field, use it for cover. Lyra, prepare a diversion using the thruster's exhaust. Timing is critical." The enemy ships adjusted quickly, but Jalen anticipated their countermoves. He had watched simulations, analyzed strategies, and trained relentlessly. Each decision he made was calculated, unpredictable, and effective. By the time the first wave of ships reached them, the Federation had already gained a strategic advantage. An enemy flagship broke through the defenses, its weapons targeting the Academy directly. Panic surged across the command deck of the Federation ships. Jalen's eyes narrowed. He knew brute force would not be enough. The flagship was heavily armored, its shields nearly impenetrable, but every system had a flaw and humans were masters at exploiting them. Lyra, draw their attention to the side vents, he commanded. Scar, lock onto the exhaust channels, use the debris to amplify the strike. Tico, relay the shield frequencies to me. His team moved in perfect coordination, following his directions without question. The flagship faltered as Jalen's plan unfolded. He calculated angles, energy flow, and timing with precision. In a single fluid motion, he directed a concentrated energy pulse through the exhaust channel while creating a diversion, hitting the ship at its weak point. The flagship shuddered violently and its shields flickered before collapsing. The other Federation ships were stunned. Who's coordinating this? One officer muttered. Jalen's heart pounded, but he stayed calm. Observation, adaptation, and improvisation. That was what humans did best. While other students relied on power alone, he had turned strategy into a weapon. On the surface below, hostile forces had already deployed ground units. Energy beasts, armored mechs, and advanced drones spread chaos across the rocky landscape. Federation soldiers were struggling to hold their positions. Jalen knew he could not control the skies alone. The ground battle required quick thinking, ingenuity, and leadership. Team, we're moving down, he said. We'll create a path through their forces. Watch my lead. The shuttle touched down amid chaos. Explosions rocked the ground as alien units attacked. Jalen assessed the situation instantly. The enemy moved predictably, their attacks repetitive despite their appearance of chaos. He guided his team through the battlefield, turning hazards into advantages. A group of drones advanced, energy cannons aimed directly at them. Most soldiers would charge blindly or retreat. Jalen ducked behind a boulder, pointing at the drones' weak points. Now, Scar, lift the rock to block their line of sight. Tico, flank left. Lyra, use your gust to knock off their balance. They followed perfectly. The drones staggered, energy shots misfired, and the battlefield shifted in their favor. Other squads watched in disbelief as a small human-led team turned what seemed like a losing fight into a strategic advantage. The enemy's ground commander, a massive armored creature with flowing energy tendrils, advanced toward them. Its presence alone radiated power, making the hair on everyone's arm stand on end. Federation troops hesitated, unsure how to counter it. Jalen stepped forward. Watch its movements, he whispered to his team. It's strong, yes, but it follows a rhythm. Every strike has a pause. We use that. Scar, draw its attention. Lyra, position above for aerial advantage. Tico, prepare for rapid strikes. I'll lead the timing. The creature swung its tendrils, energy crackling like lightning. Jalen ducked, guided his team through coordinated strikes, and used the environment, loose rocks, energy currents, and narrow passages, to neutralize the beast's advantage. Step by step, they chipped away at its strength. Finally, with a clever trap of redirected energy pulses and timed movements, the creature stumbled and fell, incapacitated. Jalen's team had done what seemed impossible. The Federation troops cheered, inspired by the human who had turned strategy into victory. High above, the enemy flagship attempted a retreat. Jalen realized that stopping it could end the battle entirely. He directed Scar and Lyra to disable its engines while Tico relayed the shield frequencies. With a calculated strike that combined timing, positioning, and ingenuity, the flagship was forced to surrender. The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary. The human who had been last in his class had become the turning point of an entire battle. His team's coordination, his leadership, and his ability to see patterns where others saw chaos had shifted the outcome completely. After the battle, the Federation Council convened. Instructors, commanders, and alien representatives watched as Jalen's report came in. Every detail, every calculation, every decision had been documented. The council murmured in astonishment. One of the senior commanders stood and addressed the room. This human, he has shown abilities far beyond what we expected. Not raw power, not innate strength, but intellect, adaptability, and strategy. He turned a near-catastrophic attack into a victory with a team that was previously underestimated. Humans are no longer a species to ignore. Jalen stood quietly in the corner, listening. He had never sought recognition. He only sought to survive, to protect his team, and to learn. Yet now the galaxy had seen the truth. Humans were unpredictable, clever, and capable of feats that no other species could anticipate. Later, at the academy, Jalen's classmates approached him. Lyra's eyes were bright with admiration. "I never believed humans could do this," she admitted. "You've changed everything." Scar nodded, a rare smile on his reptilian face. "You've proven that strength isn't only in power. Strategy, patience, and observation, that's the real weapon." Even Rill approached, hesitating. "I underestimated you. I see now that humans are dangerous in ways we never expected. Don't think I'll forget this." Jalen nodded respectfully. "That's fine. Just remember we adapt, survive, and keep learning. That's what humans do." That night, Jalen stood on the observation deck, looking at the stars stretching endlessly across the galaxy. The battle had been won, but the universe was vast, and threats would continue to rise. Yet for the first time, he felt a quiet confidence. Humans were no longer ignored, dismissed, or underestimated. Their ingenuity, creativity, and resilience had been proven on the grandest stage. Somewhere beyond the stars, other civilizations would now have to rethink what humans were capable of. Jalen smiled faintly, feeling the spark of possibility ignite within him. This was only the beginning. Humans would survive, adapt, and thrive, even in a galaxy that often counted them out. And as he watched the stars, he understood something deeper than power or skill. True strength was not in dominance, but in resilience, observation, and the courage to face impossible odds. Humans had that in abundance. The galaxy had learned the lesson the hard way. Jalen turned back to his team, who had gathered nearby. Together, they had survived what no one else thought possible. Together, they had shown that humans could not only compete with other species, they could lead, innovate, and triumph. And somewhere in the cosmos, a new respect for humanity was beginning to grow. A respect born not of fear, but of recognition. The human who had been last in his class was no longer last. He had become a symbol of hope, strategy, and ingenuity, and the universe, vast and dangerous, would never underestimate humans again. The stars above twinkled like distant beacons, a reminder that endless challenges awaited. But Jalen, the human, was ready. For the first time, he smiled without doubt, knowing that whatever came next, humans had a way to survive, adapt, and rise. The galaxy would remember this day,